My name's Rick Hammer, and I've written a book titled Mesmerizing Poe. It's based on a story written by Edgar Allan Poe titled The Mystery of Marie Roget. Chapter 1. Mary Rogers meets John Anderson. Inside Phoebe Rogers' boarding house at 126 Nassau Street, New York, on February 13, 1837, 17-year-old Mary Rogers and her mother rolled cigars, earnestly at the labor-intensive piecework that they had taken into their home. This job of work was a step up from the lives of those who were riding in the streets because they were too poor to bear the high cost of flour. As the leatherheads dragged one away, Mary Rogers thought, "Sow the wind and reap the whirlwind. Though grant him eternal rest as a token of remembrance." If someone could have seen beforehand what would come when President Andrew Jackson demanded payment in coin, and then the price of cotton fell 25%, who knows if the banks will fail and joblessness will starve us all. "Much obliged," Mary Rogers furiously nagged her mother with a rolled newspaper. Then she looked down thoughtfully as her volatile, showery temperament shifted movements dramatically along with her thoughts. "To you," she said. Her tone shifted from impetuous to annoyed. "And then, much obliged to a husband, why not to the boss? I could manage his shop." John Anderson approached the Rogers home strategically from the street, avoiding mud splatters. The bearded 25-year-old, stern, rigidly honest, sole proprietor of his tobacco shop, selling cigars and Solace, the well-known fine-cut chewing tobacco wrapped in foil, he'd come to check on his employees' drudge work. He overheard Phoebe Rogers and Mary Rogers inside, and he approached their window. He stood back in the shadows, peering in through the shutters, but within earshot, eavesdropping. Anderson could hear that Mary Rogers, out of the public eye, was drowning in her low status. She defended herself against being ground under the crowd by her urbane, articulate sarcasm. She was, after all, a New Yorker who liked to take stock of a situation with a sweeping glance. Anderson saw a blaze of debonair, alert intelligence in her glittering eyes. He liked her sweeping glances. He liked her drab expression as she listened to her mother's scolding. Anderson imagined her out of her clothes, gyrating with a dancer's sensuality and lightness. She looked right toward him, but her eyes saw only her own reflection in the window. He saw a gesture she made as she finished a cigar and brushed the surface, a gesture that struck him in the heart, willowy and fox-like. Anderson felt mature now, but he demanded respect for that, because he had converted his financial success to buying land in Manhattan. He had achieved his goal of providing chewing tobacco and snuff wrapped in foil to the military and distributing them, but did not want to be pegged as a cigar store owner. He wanted to be mayor of New York. He was handsome, bearded, thin, and strong, and stern. He knew business, but he loved better the thrill of gambling for high stakes. He was challenging and cruel, and he would love luring Mary Rogers into his web by passionate leverage. His hands struck together knife-like, invincible. "A smoke shop is no place for a beautiful young girl," Phoebe Rogers said. Anderson heard a newspaper rip, and his eyes followed the two female silhouettes. The first, with a soft, sighing laugh, paused a harmonious laugh in the other. "Principles," Mary Rogers said. "I want passion. I want sensations. I want to stir up this world." "Your father's always said, 'Seek out the risk you're ready to whip,'" Phoebe Rogers said. Then she turned and pointed due north. 319 Broadway and Thompson are just around the corner from us. "I will take Mr. John Anderson by force," Mary Rogers said. She cradled her mother. Anderson saw Mary Rogers' shadow on the window blind. "Or persuasion," Mary Rogers said. She discarded the paper. "I'm sure you'll be prudent toward dangerous friends," Phoebe Rogers said sarcastically as they continued working. Distant piano keys played Carnaval by Robert Schumann. "All men are red in tooth and claw," Phoebe Rogers advised her daughter. John Anderson overheard her and smiled, scheming his next move in ominous silence, and then knocked at the front door. Phoebe Rogers opened the door and Anderson stepped in, kneeled devoutly, and picked up the scrap of paper that Phoebe Rogers had dropped. Anderson turned to the sunlight and read the ad. New York Herald, John Anderson, Solace Tobacco. "Morning," Anderson said brusquely. He turned the ad playfully to Mary Rogers. Phoebe Rogers was flustered. "I came to check your piecework," Anderson said to Mary Rogers. "What is your name again?" "Mary Cecilia Rogers," she said. She freed her cheap light gray wool dress, showing off underneath her dress her pretty 17-year-old girl's legs. She offered her hand. "The best roller of cigars in Manhattan." Phoebe hovered protectively around Mary. "You know I am John Anderson, maker of Solace Tobacco," he said, kissing her hand. Phoebe Rogers disapprovingly kicked tobacco shavings and, picking up a broom, began tidying up the dust underfoot. Phoebe Rogers brushed the dust off the windows. Light streams in through clouds of dust motes. She swept, propped open the door, and the scent floated up from the box. "Every boy and girl in the Union wants one," Mary Rogers said, picking up a cigar. "Your father, God rest his bones," Phoebe Rogers said, correcting Mary's behavior under her breath. Mary Rogers then took charge of straightening the cigars in boxes for transport. "Would you consider hiring a woman to work in your smoke shop?" Mary Rogers said, tugging at the feminine red ribbon at her neck. "I am begging your pardon, sir," Phoebe Rogers said. She puckered and swiveled away, standing up the broom. "Buying or selling?" Anderson said to Mary Rogers. "By your leave, whatever you desire," Mary Rogers said. Anderson chuckled. "Working-class girls," he whispered to himself. Mary Rogers then approached Anderson and gave him one of the cigars she had rolled. "You know, I saw two businessmen talking outside your shop the other day," Mary Rogers said. "About what?" Anderson asked. "Setting up their own shop on Lower Broadway. But they were not sure if they could keep some hogshead fresh," Mary Rogers said. As Anderson watched Mary Rogers diplomatically, he saw through her willowy surface and felt her subtle manipulation. "They will soon be my competitors," Anderson said. Anderson took Phoebe Rogers' hand in his left and Mary Rogers' hand in his right. "I want you to come to work on Monday," Anderson said. To Mary Rogers, "as shop assistant," he added, reassuringly to Phoebe Rogers. Then Anderson whispered gently to Mary Rogers, "You report to me. Everything." Phoebe Rogers warily searched in her daughter's eyes for her deeper motives while nodding yes. Then Anderson started to exit with the rolled cigars under his arm. "Mr. Anderson reminds me so much of your father," Phoebe Rogers whispered to Mary Rogers. "Maybe this one won't go out with the tide," Mary Rogers said. Then, as John Anderson exited, Mary Rogers raced after him, taking the cigars from him. "I will start right now," Mary Rogers said. Phoebe Rogers saw Mary Rogers glance back at her with a wink, then continuing down the street with Anderson, and remain immune to seduction, Phoebe Rogers said to herself, as if she were speaking to her daughter.